Welcome back to the Infinite Rabbit Hole podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy, and today we got a special guest in the house. But before we get to anybody of importance, we have to talk to Jake. What's up, dude?
Thanks, man. Appreciate the intro.
You're welcome.
Nothing much. I'm pretty wiped out, so I don't know how good I'm going to do during this interview, but I'm here for you.
Bro, I just got off a 12-hour shift. He did.
But I actually work for a living. You don't. You sit in an office. I slave away on airplanes, so
you knock it off.
A little bit of a difference.
Anyways, so let's quickly touch on what you just said. Jeff bailed on us again. Supposedly, he's still part of the Infinite Rabbit Hole. We'll see. Anyways, but we did have somebody that did show up, and that was our old Bossman of Paranormal Network, good friend of the Infinite Rabbit Hole, author, Bossman, and legend, Jason Hewlett. What's up, dude?
Guys, how's it going?
It's going.
I can't believe the Paranormal Network, that was 2 years ago already, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. I was just thinking about that earlier today because you guys launched your video podcast I think almost exactly 2 years ago. It feels like. If not earlier, but you know what I mean? It's just heading into summer.
Yeah.
2022?
Something like that. It's been a while.
Yeah.
It's been a while. And we have never been as popular.
Which is awesome. I guess.
So, take us back.
Anyway, so we have you on today because we just finished up a block on near-death experiences, and the very first book I used for my research was your book, Dying Light. So
wow, I'm honored, man, that you started with that.
Well, yeah, of course, man. Good friend. I trust your research. I really do. Let's just start off with the easy question. What brought you to doing a book on NDEs?
It was almost so. Peter Wren, he's a good friend of mine, and he's the co-founder of our Canadian Paranormal Society. Him and I started that up here in Canada. We're in Canada for those people who don't know where we are.
Yeah.
He and I wrote 2 previous books, all 3 published through Beyond the Fray Publishing. And when we were doing our second book, which is called I Want to Believe, an Investigator's Archive, our whole point with that book was to interview a variety of paranormal researchers and cryptozoologists, etc., and kind of tell their stories. And one of the people we interviewed, Angela Artuso, was telling kind of her story. And right in the middle of it was this, she had this near-death experience, which is actually in this book. It's the Man in Black chapter in this book. And when we were done, I called Peter up because it was right in the middle of COVID, so we couldn't do the interviews in person. And most of the people we interviewed didn't live anywhere near us. I'm like, Pete, we got to do a book on near-death experiences. That story was too good to include in the book. It would just get lost in the middle of telling her story. And he's like, yeah, we need to do that. I know people who have had near-death experiences, etc. Pete had one of his own. And so I contacted our publisher, and they were all over it. They're like, yeah, do a book on near-death experiences. And we were contractually had to do another book too. So that felt like just the right thing to do. So it was Angela's story that kicked the whole thing off for us. And then it was that fall kind of became this deep dive into learning as much as I could about near-death. Because I'd heard of near-death experiences. I'd watched that Netflix series. What was it? I can't remember the title of it, Surviving Death. And found it interesting, but I didn't know if I believed it, kind of thing. It's just one of those, felt like a pop culture thing to me.
Yeah.
And so, but it was really interesting to kind of really dig into it and do a deep dive into the subject matter and learn more about it and kind of realize I was kind of wrong in my initial skeptical assessment of what this is that people are having happen to them.
That's wild, because one of the first things that Dr. Jeffrey Long touches on in his book is what he refers to as the Oprah effect, because she basically polarized the topic of near-death experiences, and after that, more and more people started coming forward, and then that could either mean one or two things. It could mean that people are wanting to tell their story, and they're not so afraid of the ridicule that comes with it because they see how accepting the stories are, how interested people are in, or they're creating them. So that's one of the big skeptic point of point of views on the whole near-death experience, but sort of like you, I also went into the near-death experience. I started off, like I said, reading your book, right? It's something that's been on the docket for a long time that I was eventually going to cover. And I read your book and I was like, this is some really interesting stuff. So I got a few books that you referenced in your book because I wanted to see where you got your research from. And I think I bought 3 books, and then I bought 2 more books off of another book I read, and then another book off another book I read, and now I have 7 or 8 of them. And the farther I went down this rabbit hole, the more I started to really think to myself. I even pulled Jake aside one night, and I was like, dude, there's something to this. It's freaking wild. And I mean, I don't know. I don't get into the spiritual side of a lot of stuff. But this really, really opened my eyes. And I told him, I said, man, I think there's something. I think there's
glad
something
it was
more.
something. I've been telling you about Jesus for 4 years now. Finally, he just starts looking into NDEs, and he's just like, "There's something else out there." I'm like, "Yeah, I kind of figure." I'm like, well, good.
Whatever works, man.
It's funny them calling it near-death experiences. It should be like back from the dead experiences, because I mean, I've had a near-death experience. I almost stepped off a curb, hesitated for a second. A semi-truck just blasted through a red light right in front of me. I would have been done, right? But so from my perspective, I've never really put much weight into these NDEs, because I'm just like, yeah, who hasn't almost died? I didn't come out of my body when I did it, right? Type stuff. Like, it wasn't like, some weird hypersensitive awareness. But getting into it over the last couple weeks, because Jeremy talked to me and everything, saying that he had a complete perspective shift and like a way of living shift because of his research into NDEs, that it really touched him and impacted him. And I was like, from people like almost having accidents, like, what are you talking about? And so I started getting into it, and it was pretty wild seeing things like verifiably dead for like an hour and a half type people, like flatlined in the ICU. They're like zipping them up in the bag type stuff, right? Transporting them to the morgue, and they wake up out of that sort of stuff, and having not just the people interviewed, but also the doctors, and saying like, what the doctors were doing at the time, or like a kid that died on the operating table that, not only saw his dad screaming out to God in the closet, but also said, "Hey, I met my sister who was from a miscarriage they had had years before," and they're not going to tell their 4-year-old son that, you would have had a sister, but she's dead now, right?
Yeah.
Type stuff. And so getting into that and being like, oh, wow, there's a lot here. And then like, oh man, I should look into this too. It's pretty crazy.
Well, there's some, like, we interviewed a gal. Hang on here, I got to remember her name. Sorry, guys, it's been a long time since I actually read my own book.
No, you're good. You like, we'll just to tell everybody a little bit about what we'll be talking about tonight. Since he's put out this book, he's basically become Mr. Celebrity, and he worked on a documentary and book on the Legend of Ogopogo. So we'll be jumping into that later. That's why he needs a refresher, just so you know.
Right. Thank you for that. Lynn Russell. Like, Lynn Russell was a researcher. And she told me, like, there's people who have been dead for 12 hours who've come back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, they are actually not just being taken to the morgue, they've been in the morgue. Like, rigor mortis is set in, and then they're waking up. I mean, she did research into like more than 1,500 cases all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
So there is something to this phenomenon, and it is like, I had the same experience as you, Jeremy. By the time I had finished like researching the book, and it took a long time. Ogopogo book is the only one that took longer. My perception on the whole death experience has changed a lot. To the point where there's no doubt that like this isn't the end. Like, when you die, it's not just black and it's over. Like, there's things, life beyond death. For sure. And I agree with yours too, Jake. It should be called the surviving death. Like, it's people are dead. Like, they're not like almost hit by a car or like, a boy getting hit by a 25-foot beam falling on them. They are done. Like, they flatline for even
no brain activity,
30 seconds, 1 minute. You know what I mean? They're done.
Right.
And it seems that every year more people are talking about it and coming forward with their stories. And there seems to be everyone that has these experiences is changed by it, and they're
Mhm.
changed for the better. For the
Right.
most part, there's a few where they're very bad experiences, but for the majority of them, it's a positive. They just view the world differently, life differently. They live freer, they're happier.
Mhm.
They all talk about going to a place of peace and love, and they're,
Yep.
everything's calm. And that to me was, I thought, amazing, especially in a world where it just seems like there's not a lot of that
Yeah.
going around
yeah.
right now, right?
I think it was Dr. Bruce Grayson. I could be misquoting here. It could have been Jeffrey Long, but one of those two did a whole section on cultural influences, and how an NDE is basically described the same throughout time and culture. We may use different words to describe what we're going through, but if you look at the core of what they're describing, it's basically the same thing. So it's absolutely wild that it's either just a natural thing, which is another big skeptic point of view on this, is that this is just something that our brain does as like a survival mechanism to make sure that we're not freaking out during the biggest thing that'll ever happen to us in life. Um, they even go down to describing how this could be like one last grand finale of electrical works going on in your brain, in your memory section, and that's how you get your life review, quote unquote. But if you look at like EEGs during the time of death, there's nothing that that proves that. Absolutely nothing. In fact, the evidence that we have disproves that. So the fact that we're not going through that, but yet we're still having the same experience throughout time, because we have some really far back documentation. I mean, pen and paper, going back to the Roman Empire when the printing press was created. We have documentation of NDEs. If you go to places of hieroglyphs like ancient China or Egypt, ancient Mexico, you see some references to NDEs too, and you could still see things such as a tunnel of light, a gathering with loved ones, all that stuff. It's incredible, absolutely incredible stuff.
It is. And I wanted to get the skeptical point in there. Like, I talked to a physicist named Lawrence Ward, and he brought up the same thing. About, that it's the brain shutting down and
Right.
everything
Yep.
coming to an end in your body as a way to explain it, because we can't measure consciousness once a person's like out, basically. Like, so
Right.
there's an argument about, is it your consciousness just shutting down, or is it more? But I like even he kind of brings up the point that even if he doesn't believe that in near-death experiences are happening, but he still sees it as a positive, because there's spirituality to life.
Mhm.
Like, he doesn't think people are like dead when it's happening, but it's having a positive effect on people. And I think regardless of where you stand on it, that should be the big takeaway. This is not even though we are so scared of death in our society and in our culture. We don't even have funerals anymore. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, they're called celebrations of life. Like, we are avoiding this topic like the plague. But as you said, Jeremy, it is the biggest thing that's going to happen to us, and it happens to everyone.
Yep.
And I think, we need to start looking at it as not this bad thing. It's a positive thing. It's just the end of one thing.
Yeah.
Moving on to something else. We got to start. And I'm
Well-
glad, like, doing shows like this, that you're getting that conversation going with people, and your listeners are going to hear it, and hopefully it just gets people changing the way they view death. We shouldn't view it as this big negative. It's an inevitability.
Yeah.
And it's
Well, I
a
think
natural part of the
that-
process, and it's not bad.
I think that comes with a lot of what's going on in the cultural aspect today and people's beliefs on things. There seems to be a tremendous amount of like rampant narcissism where it's all about me and me getting as much as I want because this is all I have left, and after this there's nothing. And that puts a lot of fear in people, because it's like, well, I'm wasting time because after this there's nothing. But then, you think about the inevitable end, whenever it might be. I mean, for some of us, it's surrounded by our family members in a hospital bed, or in, elderly care or something like that, assisted living, whatever. Some of us, it's getting slammed by a car on the way to work. Like, it's just, it could happen at any time. in any number of ways. And if you just wrap it up in your head that that's it and nothing's after that, I think that in itself could be pretty scary, because all we know is this. All we know is consciousness. All we know is I'm here. I'm touching the desk, right? I exist. And not having this anymore is pretty terrifying. But even if it was like, if you took the religious aspect out of that and you just said, what some skeptics would say of just like it's your brain's final moments and all that sort of stuff. If that was, I don't believe that's the case as a Christian guy, but if it was, at least we would have that, because it wouldn't just be screaming anxiety into nothingness, right? It would be your brain doing its very best to calm you and relax you and ease you into, nothing or whatever, right? Which would be in itself just, I'm going to use the word miracle, but it would be like, oh, well, thank goodness, But yeah, it's definitely an interesting topic. There's definitely a lot of I think that the cultural aspect of it too, going past just religious boundaries, or some I don't know, like you might find say like sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis seems to change when it comes to different cultures around the world, or at least what they say about it. It like kind of varies somewhat. But this topic seems to have way more parallels than that, which leads me to believe that it's more of a real thing, like not just, I'm not saying people don't experience stuff during sleep paralysis, but you know what I'm saying? The thing with
it's consistent. Like it's consistent. There is the tunnel of light. There is usually at the end. There's like at least one loved one or someone that you're familiar with.
Sure.
There are other beings. There's a sense of peace. There's usually something speaking to you, be it the figure you see or just this voice talking to you. And there's this feeling of oneness with everything around you.
Right.
And then there is the life review. Like quite often you go, like, there's that life review where you can go through it. And what's really interesting, like they're talking with Scott Taylor, like talks about like, not only is there this life review, you can see these points where you've impacted people and you feel kind of what they felt. So you've seen the bits where you've been this asshole. And there's also an opportunity to correct that within that moment. Like it seems far out there, but more than one person is talking about it. It's not like one wingnut having this experience. Like you're hearing hundreds of thousands of these cases that are exactly the same.
Yeah. And it's wild because we'll just stick on the life review for a minute. I have so many points to go over in my head. It's crazy right now. But like the life review, you have, like you said, you're able to see, and this has been reported by a lot of different people, you can see not only your point of view, but the point of view of everybody involved. So I think it was, who was it? I want to say it was Raymond Moody, Dr. Raymond Moody, who had this example of the grocery store clerk, right? So you have this new clerk, and he's, a little nervous, the first job. You were an asshole to him. You're like, well, you know what, dude, you suck. And, thanks for my cash. You gave me an extra $5. I'm not going to let you know. Fuck you. I'm going to move on. But then when you go to that moment in your life review, you not only get to see that point of view from your point of view, but also from their point of view, from the people watching you's point of view, from, any point of view that you could possibly think of. You're seeing that happen, and you're seeing how what you did influenced that person at that point, and not only at that point for how you influenced the rest of their lives. You see how this person went home and kicked his dog, and that dog had internal bleeding and ended up passing away, and that guy's kid was really sad and grew up and hated life and had issues throughout their lives, and all just because of that little thing that happened. And you see that, sorry about that example, it's kind of brutal, but just to kind of
it's true though. Like it's a good point to make, and I think it's something like you were saying, like Jake was saying, like we're in this narcissistic mindset right now. We're talking about me, and actually, no, it's not. It's how we interact with everyone around us, and
Right.
everything we do impacts other people.
Yeah.
And we need to stop behaving this way.
You know,
And these things
ahead.
are almost like an awakening for those people that have them. Sorry, Jake.
No, it's funny you say that, Jeremy, because I've been saying for a while now that I'm not a big coincidence guy, and I believe that there are things like divine meetings and appointments and things like that, or you're supposed to talk to someone at this point for X, Y, and Z. Maybe it's that coworker that you just happen, and this has happened to me, especially when I was in the Navy, actually really like right before I got out, but you know, you just happen to take that extra 5 minutes on a break, even though you're not really supposed to. You happen to see that one coworker that looks really down and depressed. Turns out they're thinking about going home and just taking themselves out, and you're able to intervene in that moment, right? You can consider that chance. You could say it's coincidence. You could say it's divine intervention or divine appointments or whatever you want to say. And I like to think that, let's just say like any of those movies where there's like they're hunting the killer or whatever it is, and they got all the yarn all over the wall and all the pictures and everything, and this links to that and this links to that. I was like, wouldn't it be cool if you got there and God was like, all right, so here's you, and here's where you ran into this person, you said that one thing, and then they branched off over here, and did this sort of thing. And I've said that for a couple of years now. It's just like because you never know, right? You never know what your impact does. Let's just say you try to be the best person you can or the kindest person or whatever it is, but you never know if that one pay it forward moment did anything in that person's life, or if they carried it over into the next person's life or whatever, right? And so when you said that, Jeremy, in the episode, I was like, wow, that's kind of sort of what I was just thinking about. And just right here, it's like, how did that moment, that one little blip in our timeline, impact everything else around us, right?
Yeah.
That one person you flipped off on the freeway because you're just like all mad at traffic and stuff, how did that affect that person who might have been having a much worse day than you, right? Type stuff. Or vice versa. You show kindness to someone that's needs it at that moment.
Yeah.
And you'll never know, or at least you think you'll never know.
Yeah. There's a lot here, and I'll tell the listeners one thing. I'm petrified of death. Like, petrified of it. Anybody that knows me in person knows there's two things that literally scare the shit out of me: death and snakes. I hate snakes.
Snakes, definitely snakes.
I hate snakes.
I'm gonna hide a snake in his sock drawer.
And
a rubber snake.
And I'm gonna die. Anyway,
you get it both wrapped up at once. Check it.
I can't say that this research has made me comfortable with the concept of death, but it at least makes me think of it in a different light. I like when I say that I'm petrified of death, I mean I've spent multiple nights in my life laying in bed thinking about oblivion. What is it going to be like when I'm gone? Kind of stuff. And I mean, I suffer myself. I suffer from stress or depression, anxiety, and PTSD. And those nights where I'm laying in bed thinking about this stuff does not help whatsoever. And I've done this numerous times throughout my life, from when I was a kid all the way up until the current day. But this topic alone has really done a lot to help me. It's funny because like I'll lay in bed now and I'll get in my feels and start thinking about that. I don't know why I do it, how I do it, or what triggers it, but it just happens. And I will grab my phone and I'll look up NDE experiences, and I'll just read through people's experiences, and you just start seeing the consistencies through them. I mean, every once in a while you get one that's like way out of left field. And you're like, okay, well, skip, let me go to the next one. And then you start seeing the consistencies, and then you start seeing that you start feeling like, man, maybe there is something after this. Maybe maybe I'm so stressed out about nothing. And it's a nice therapy. I guess that's where I'm trying to get to, is that this subject alone was a really nice therapy for me, and it gave me a tool that I could use. So like I told Jake, like, there has never been a subject that has touched me or changed me so much like this subject. I love this subject, and I told the travelers, I don't know what episode I did it on. As of right now, at this point during recording, we only dropped part 1. Part 2 will be coming out next. But by the time you get this recording, both of that have been dropped out. So forgive me, whichever one it was. But I could very well see a part 3, possibly a part 4, coming out of near-death experiences at some point. And that was all kicked off thanks to Jason's book. So thanks, Jason.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm glad. I look at the book because it was an introduction to me. It's almost more of an introduction to the subject matter, I think, hopefully for people. Like, it's a good way to kind of get into it and then want to ask those questions and read more. Because that's kind of what, by the time I was done, like, it's one I'd eventually like to write a follow-up to, because there is so much. I feel like I just kind of scratched the surface with a few like anecdotal stories and, there's a little bit of skepticism. And then, like, we were talking to Jolene, who did, like, she was the trauma counselor. They talk about why we feel it's important to believe that there's more, right? Like, there's so much here, and it is such a, like, I think it can be a spiritual topic for people who aren't spiritual. Like, I think it can kind of, they may not be like religious, but I think it can introduce them to the concept of even just spirituality in general.
Yeah.
And I think that to me is really important, because we need something. Everyone needs that kind of in there. Like, I too, Jeremy, I've got depression, anxiety, PTSD, and you need something more to kind of hang on to than just reality sometimes, right? Like, I too was terrified of the subject. I think what scared me more, because my dad died when I was young, so it was kind of being introduced to it far younger than a lot of people were. And then what scares me now is like that happening, like me dying, and then because I saw what it did to my mom and it did to me, like, so having that happen to my wife and to my kid, and I don't want to put them through that. And that's almost what scares me more.
Yeah.
Right. Than anything else. So it's a tough subject, and it's a subject that, like I said earlier, we tend to tap dance around.
Yeah.
I think Jeremy might tick some people off. I don't really care. I tend to do that anyway. But I think, given the evidence of, through NDE research, really digging into it, seeing, like what Jason was talking about, 12 hours dead, like rigor mortis, frozen in the morgue type stuff, and waking up. If you actually start digging into it and you really get into the evidence of it, and not just like someone said this is what happened to them, but there's medical reviews done by it, there's interviews with the doctors, they're confirming it, they're confirming what the person said they saw. How would they know that sort of stuff? They were in the deepest coma we could put them in while we're doing this brain surgery on them because of an aneurysm, right? Type stuff. Like, there's no way they would know this sort of stuff. I think you'd have to be a complete and utter fool if you could look at that sort of stuff and be like, it's all baloney.
Yeah.
No, exactly. There's hard,
it's
hard
just
evidence there. It's not all anecdotal evidence. There's hard evidence.
Right. And it, like we said in the very beginning, it's not just Western society. It's not just the Indians. It's not just the Hindus. It's not just the Buddhists. It's not just the Christians or whatever it is. It just parallels pretty much the same story all the way through, all around the world, every single continent. People are experiencing the same thing. And if you could look at that and just be like, rubbish, be like, well, you might be an idiot.
Not so much. I was surprised too how the reincarnation bit played into it too, and that was kind of just something that was thrown my way when I was lining up interviews. But it was interesting how there's sort of enough evidence there too that people are coming across to support that people have kind of done this before.
Yeah.
In some way, shape, or form. I found that kind of fascinating, and it kind of gets you thinking about the whole concept of timelines and string theory, and time is actually a flat circle and not like a chronological series of events. And I found that kind of threw me for a loop, that kind of ended up in there, but it just sort of worked as part of the narrative of these experiences that people are having. Because there's a lot of talk, like I know Scott Taylor talked about it, and so did Bettenhouse and Bogny Kidd when they were talking about the reincarnation bit. But all of this exists on a kind of a different frequency. All these different kind of possibilities, and people are talking about being able to, like, through meditation, vibrate. I don't know. That seems far out there. But if we're talking about living after death, you can kind of almost vibrate to these different planes of existence that fit within that, like energy. We're all made of energy, and so it's playing around with that energy where you can see a look at like a past life, or even go to that place where you go when you have these death experiences. I don't know. I found that to be kind of mind blowing a bit too, and not out of the realm of belief or possibility. I don't know. What did you think, Jeremy, when you kind of read that stuff?
So I in my presentations, I touched slightly, like very slightly. I mentioned reincarnation, but that's like when I say that there's a third and fourth episode here eventually, that is something. But I did, however, talk about multiple timelines and actually, I think I want to say that I quoted you in your book about deja vu, about it potentially being an answer for deja vu, because if you go back to a little while ago when we were talking about the life review, there was a concept that we missed on, that we haven't touched on yet today, and that is seeing it in different playouts, like going down different paths. So instead of yelling at that new kid, you were kind to him and you said, "Hey man, thanks, you're gonna do great," right? And you walked up, and none of that bad shit happened. And in fact, that kid went to, that he took that confidence that you gave him, and just became an all-around all-star in the grocery store, which gave him the juice he needed to become a CEO one day, or an entrepreneur, and it's that kind of stuff where if you're having your life review, how do you have that? How is that existing? How is there a record of how that turned out? And that's when you get into timeline conversations, and you get into multiverses and parallel worlds, and the potential for how deja vu exists in our life, because at some point, and we're kind of getting a little bit off topic here, but when timelines line up slightly or temporarily, is, when they say, or not they, because there's a lot of different ways to explain deja vu, but one of the explanations is that timelines line up, and you feel like you've lived it before, where in fact you're just viewing it twice. You're viewing it from your timeline and another person's timeline, and the simple fact that when people go and have these life reviews, they're seeing it from not just different perspectives, but from different perspectives across a different timeline. And it's very interesting. Like when I say I've got another 3, I got episode 3 and 4 like ready to roll, man. I've got more stuff I can talk about. So eventually it's going to happen, travelers. I need to spend some time on some other subjects. I can't spend
He's
too
never
long
coming
on.
back to it.
I will, dude. I will.
He's getting wrapped up in other stuff.
Right now I'm wrapped up in Elmwood. That's my number one priority, and that's kind of to be honest. Everybody listening right now, you guys want to hear why I didn't do a part 3 and part 4 together with this? Yeah, you can blame CJ and Jeff, those douchebags. they
They're
bailed
just
on me with
affecting
their
your
episodes.
timeline.
They're
just bailing on you. It's
bailed
gonna
on me,
cause your career to plummet. And they're going to see in their life review. This is why Jeremy became homeless.
They were supposed to come out with 2 episodes for me, and both of them bailed and said that they couldn't do it. So I had to throw out some NDE stuff before it was really ready. Because honestly, I was building up episode 3 for sure, and then I was gonna probably scrounge together an episode 4 on just the loose ends. But yeah, no, great stuff. I don't want to spend too much longer on this, Jason, because I want to get into the rest of the stuff, the other stuff.
Whatever, man. Whatever you want to do. I mean, we could talk, like you say, NDEs for like hours. Like there's so much material to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It's incredible. And another thing that I didn't get to talk about during these 2 episodes of the NDEs was to get more into the medical side of it, like the actual science research, the scientific research and stuff. Like you had mentioned in your book, I can't remember the name of the researcher, but Dr. Bruce Grayson invented the Grayson scale,
Mhm.
and someone created a way to modernize that. And the issue with the Grayson scale is that it's a multiple choice thing, right? So you can create false memories in somebody, or give somebody the tools to create a false memory by giving them the options to choose from. Where in your book you highlighted somebody else's uh, experiment or research, where instead of giving them that, they gave them a blank piece of paper, and they said,
Yes.
write down your research, write down your NDE. And then they fed that information into AI, and
So look at
AI
the
AI was able to pick out all the patterns. And guess what?
Commonality of words, as Andreas Sodou, Dr.
Yeah,
Andreas Sodou. Yeah, and the commonality of words, and that's where I can't remember the exact percentage, but it was 75 or 80% positive experiences, right?
yep.
Light, love, all these words. They'd look at the common words that would come up in all of them. It was fascinating. And even he knew someone, a paramedic friend of his, that electrocuted himself and had a near-death experience
Yep.
as well, and came back and shared that with him too. And that was fun. And he Sodou
That was an
believes
incredible story.
100% in this being a real thing.
Yeah. And not only are you seeing these commonalities with terminologies, right? Because to kind of clear up a little bit on his research was, they may not always say tunnel. They could say words like hallway, road, path, right? But where other people may separate those titles, it could just be the way that they're describing the same thing. So this AI was able to clump those together and say, okay, out of all of these, 75% of them described some pathway that you go on. But another interesting thing is that in my research, or in my first episode, I believe it was, I talked about 9 characteristics, or 12 characteristics, sorry, that all NDEs seem to have at least one of. And that was outlined by Dr. Jeffrey Long in his book, Evidence of the Afterlife. Very, very good book. But you see the parallels between what you pointed out with Dr. Soto, you said?
Yep.
With Dr. Soto's research, still the same elements that I pointed out from Dr. Long in episode 1 of the NDEs is still being reflected, such as the life review, the pathway, the out of body experience, the increase of your senses, more powerful senses, the immediate knowledge of things. All of them. I can't name them all off the top of my head, but yeah, absolutely incredible stuff.
Oh yeah.
But
Coming back
before
different too. That's the other part that's very consistent. Is everybody comes back different.
that was his 12th point, was
Yeah.
that you come back most of the time. It is a very, very positive influence on your life. So yeah, very, very good stuff. Do you have anything else you want to talk about tonight about NDEs?
No, I think like you said, we could go into it. I think the only other one that really stands out for me, other than like Angela's sort of Man in Black story, is the Scott Taylor's, where he didn't die, but someone else did, and he got taken along for that journey. I thought that was more unique. I think it's more of a rarity
The shared
in the
experience.
field. The shared death experience. That one I
And
thought was interesting.
that's another one that I left out of my first 2 episodes that CJ and Jeff robbed everybody of, was that I was going to get into. Yeah, I'm going to blame it all on them, all of it. You hear this, scumbags? It's all your fault. No, I love them. I'm happy to cover. But
Every hero needs a nemesis.
That's right.
It's just otherwise, what's the point, right? So
mine is CJ and Jeff right now. It's them, yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. Jason, we might have to get you back on at some point, especially after I end up dropping part 3 and part 4.
Sure.
That way we can fit continue this conversation. But until then,
I'll
we
make sure I'll
are.
reread my book beforehand. Off the top of my
Hey,
head
man.
now.
Jeremy, I feel blindsided here. This is going to go down in my life review. You better, if you're going to have me on this episode, don't say, hey, this is about NDEs. Say, hey, this is about Jason's book that he wrote about NDEs, so I can at least be well versed in that.
Well, I mean, if you listen to my episodes, I quoted Jason quite a bit in those
Yeah,
episodes.
that was today. You know what? I don't even know how to read. Like, I have to wait for the audiobook to come out and all that stuff.
The audiobook just came out. You're lucky. You can just put it on and listen to it at work.
See? I'll listen to it while I'm doing my job, and then I'll actually have something to say about what he wrote.
Every hero needs a nemesis. I don't know.
Yeah, that's right.
I heard that somewhere. But since we are doing this on YouTube, here's the book. It's called Dying Light by Jason Hewlett and his buddy Peter Wren. So by all means, go ahead and check that out. Jason, you have anything that you want to put out about this book really quick before we move on?
Nope. I think we touched on all we can at this point.
All right. Well, one that I did not do research onto because the book isn't out yet, and neither is the documentary. You are getting into the world of the cryptids, especially up there in the Great White North. Specifically, one that Jake and I had covered with our good friend, mutual friend, Phantom Phil, Ogopogo.
Yep.
You are diving deep into the waters of Lake Okanagan. Yeah. So bring us into that. How'd you get that?
Well, that started. I started researching a book on Ogopogo. It was like early last year, so early 2023. Just because I live like 2 hours away from Kelowna, right? I've been there. I've seen the statue. I've heard the stories my whole life. I wanted to kind of write a book about it. And it was originally going to be for Beyond the Fray. Just had one more book to write in the contract kind of thing, and I was like, this is a great subject. And Pete wasn't really interested in doing it, so I was like, I'll do it by myself because why not? And then literally like a week after I started researching the book, I was talking with Eli Watson, of course, with Small Town Monsters. And at the time, he was doing a show called Mysteries and Monsters, and he's like, we're all coming up to Canada because we're going to do On the Trail of Bigfoot, the origin out of Harrison Hot Springs, which is really where the Sasquatch story started. With John Green's research, etc. And he's like, Seth Breedlove is going to give me a few days. I can go off and kind of do whatever I want. And he's like, I want to do something on Ogopogo. Do you want to help out? And I didn't even think about it. I'm like, yes. I said, because I'm writing this book. So it's like you said, Jake, there are no coincidences. Like I've started writing a book about Ogopogo. Someone comes up and wants to do something on Ogopogo. So
sure.
That happened in May of last year. Eli and I spent like 2.5 days in Kelowna doing this documentary that we thought was just going to be a YouTube episode at the time. And I continued writing my book, and I ended up being interviewed for On the Trail of Bigfoot, the origin with that too. So I got to know the Small Town Monsters folks. And the book wrapped up. I finished writing it in like October. And Eli and I were talking. I'm like, Eli, the book has become like, it's not this just a bunch of different stories about Ogopogo. Like it's become a whole, it's something else completely. And it's something I don't think Beyond the Fray is going to be into. And Eli's like, yeah, we should talk to Seth about it because they have their publishing arm. Long story short, I was able to get out of this Beyond the Fray contract, and Small Town Monsters picked up the book. And so they decided that instead of that being a YouTube episode, they were going to make it one of their feature-length documentaries, which is now called Cursed Waters, Creature of Lake Okanagan. And the book is coming out called The Legend of Ogopogo, Canada's Loch Ness Monster. And both drop at Monster Fest in Canton, Ohio at the end of the month.
That's phenomenal. Good stuff.
Yeah, and I never had dreamt that would even remotely play out in any way, shape, or form like this. Especially, I've got a film background. I love Small Town Monsters. I think they do kind of the best like cryptid paranormal documentaries out there. And so to be able to have something I've done be a part of that, and Eli directed Cursed Waters, but I helped film it. I did a lot of the interviews. I'm interviewed for it. I was with him through the whole process of making it, basically. And he was very gracious to kind of really push for that, things to happen. And Seth really liked the idea and was excited about it. And yeah.
Man, I'll tell you, when I started Infinite Rabbit Hole, there was 3 big names on the list that I eventually wanted to have on the show, like sometime down the road, 10, 15 years down the road, that, even today I look out and I'm like, those names are just too big. They'll never come on, right? One of them, Seth Breedlove. I love his stuff. what he's done with small town monsters is incredible, and anybody who is into cryptids, or they've even done UFO stuff too with small
Yep.
town monsters.
UFO stuff, yeah.
Yeah, all
Dogman,
kinds
like
of.
they're kind of touching on all
Yeah,
that. They do some Mothman was part
yeah.
of
I
it. They've
think
done stuff on Mothman.
Aaron Deese, right?
Yep.
Just did the Dog Man's. He basically did a same concept as you. They put out a documentary and a book, didn't they?
Yeah,
Together.
Texas Dogman Triangle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same kind of thing. And then his second book, Hunting Grounds, all about the LBL, like the land between the lakes. That book just came out, and that documentary is coming out pretty quick too, I think.
Yeah. But Seth Breedlove is what he's done with Small Town Monsters and that whole crew, Shannon LeGros and the bunch, are just it changed the entire landscape of cryptid research. Because a lot of people may not know this, but if you go and you look at a documentary that has any kind of solid production value to it, it's Small Town Monsters.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, their stuff is on, I believe it's on Amazon. You can rent it on Amazon mostly, and their stuff is incredible. The research,
they're really good, and it was neat to meet them all because they're really good people too. Like, sometimes like you don't want to meet your heroes kind of thing, or complete respect, but it wasn't. They're all great. Like they're all really good, and yeah, no, Seth is amazing, and you should reach out like to Seth because I'm sure he'd come on. He's always willing to talk.
I would love to. I would love to. Another one of the people that I've always wanted to interview was Shannon LeGros, and I ended up going on her show to tell her about my Bigfoot experience, and I got cold feet. I wanted to ask her to come on the show. I wanted to ask her, and I got.
She'll do it too. Like I guarantee you. Like she would do it. Shannon's awesome. Like
so, I ended up emailing her, and I could only imagine the amount of emails she has on her inbox. So it probably just got lost amongst everything else. But yeah, so anybody listening to this, yeah, I'm a loser, and I didn't get emailed back by Shannon LeGros, so whatever.
Oh,
anyways. And then just to fill in that whole thing, the third one is Lauren Coleman. I would love to get him on the show one day too.
That'd be awesome. I've never met Lauren or had the chance even to talk to him. If he's
at
number 4, maybe I will.
Number 4 was Jason Hewlett, and here he is. My hero. So, I mean, can you talk about the documentary and the book? Can you kind of come out
I can a bit. Like it's so what we like. I mean, both the documentary and the book kind of take a look. It starts looking at things from kind of the historical perspective and the stories that everybody knows about Ogopogo, right? And it is one of the most documented like lake monsters out there. I think in some ways even more so than Nessie, because look, with Nessie, it's like one person usually seeing it, but there's bits where with Ogopogo, there's like a dozen people have seen it all at the same time.
Yep.
Right. But what's interesting is that Ogopogo itself is a made-up word. It's actually, I'm going to really butcher it, but it's like Ntsnaha-Itsu from the West Bank First Nations. And for them, it is literally, it's a water spirit. It is the spirit of the lake, and it's a very important part of their culture. And what always happens is us white people come in and take it and misconstrue it and make it into something that it's not. So Ogopogo, the word came up in like the Vernon dance halls in like the 1920s or 30s, right? And they made the word up, talking about this silly creature in the water that plays the banjo. And that word actually stuck, and it's become this big tourism mascot for Kelowna and the Okanagan region. So there's the documentary kind of becomes about that. There's two parts to it. There's this real serious, legitimate water spirit that's a part of Indigenous culture. And then there's this kind of derpy cartoon character, but that also people seem to think that you have to give sacrifices to, or it'll eat you if you go in the water. Right. And so it's a lot, the documentary and the book become a lot about these two different things, and in a way trying to explain what it could really be. And so there's like, in the book, I talked to Ken Gearhard, and Steve Culls about from a more cryptozoology standpoint, but then there's also this very spiritual component to it that's more than that. Yeah, and there's even a bit of a conservationist message that comes into it too, because if this spirit is this Ogopogo or Ntaitu is the lake, you've got to preserve the lake and keep it clean and pure.
Yeah.
You know, like it's so there's a lot. That's what I mean. It was more than just a monster, is what the Ogopogo story is.
Lake Okanagan is in a basin, right? Isn't it?
Well, it's a glacial lake. It's
Okay.
long, narrow, and it and Loch Ness are almost within like just a couple geographical points apart if you look at it on the globe. And
Oh,
so
really?
these lakes, and most of the lakes where people have these sightings all over the world are the same. They're kind of the same kind of lake, long,
Mhm.
narrow, very deep, a lot of salmonoid fish in it.
Yeah.
Temperatures are very consistent. And despite what people see when it comes to like Nessie with the plesiosaur, which was like that was a that was a scam. That's like that was a fake. It's not. It's a very much a long serpentine creature. So is Nessie supposed to be with like a kind of a forked tail, like a whale's tail, and
Mhm.
like a head like a horse sort of thing. And these champs very much the same. So it's a very different. There's consistency enough that from scientifically you could say it's all what we're seeing is the same species just spread out across
Yeah.
the globe.
I know with Loch Ness, gosh, I want to say it was maybe 2012, 2016, maybe 2016. They did the eDNA, the
Yes.
environmental DNA on it. Do you know? It came up inconclusive for anything with the exception of a few species of fish and eels. Although sightings continue to happen.
Yeah.
I was just listening to an episode recently with Paige Daly. She's the she runs the registrar for documented sightings of Loch Ness, or Loch Ness monster rather. Do you know if there's anything in the works, or has there been anything done to do the same sort of study in Lake Okanagan?
Not in terms of the eDNA sort of test. That'd be really cool. But there's a gentleman named Bill Stasiuk who runs it. Like it's like ogopogoquest.com. And you go to that website, man, and it's like got everything you need to know about Ogopogo right down to sightings. People can submit their sightings to the website, right? And we had got to go out with Bill to Rattlesnake Island, which is where Ogopogo is said to live, in this cave system kind of beneath it, and where a lot of the sightings take place near Squally Point. And that was pretty cool to go out there and actually be in that spot. And you're like 15 feet from shore, and it's like 200 feet deep. Like once you're on that lake,
Oh wow!
I was like, oh, lake monster. How can something live? It's a limited body of water.
Sure.
There's no way. Your perception changes when you're out on that lake and you see how deep it is so quick and things like that. It's really
the shelf
interesting
just drops
stuff.
off.
Yeah, it's gone, right? And there's very much a belief that a lot of the lakes in British Columbia are interconnected through tunnel systems. That people postulate that whatever Ogopogo is can move from lake to lake and even follow like the river through the Columbia River out to the ocean and kind of make its way back. And of course, off the coast of British Columbia, we've got the Cadborosaurus, which looks very similar to what people describe Ogopogo could be. So there's a lot more to the story than this funny creature that's on postcards and T-shirts and hats, right? Like it's a fascinating thing. And much like with Dying Light, I went into this doing the Ogopogo stuff with one idea, and I came out of it with something completely different perspective on it, which I don't really want to say here because I hope people will watch Cursed Waters and read the book to kind of see where I went with that. But it was, and I think I can't even call it a conclusion. It's just one possibility will like irk people about what's going on in Lake Okanagan.
Well, there goes my second question.
Without getting too deep into it, I suppose, or say what you can. I think something that really strikes us here when we do our episodes on specific cryptids and stuff is when, like you were alluding to, or you said right at the beginning of this, that the Native Americans, now I don't know if what you meant was that they they saw sightings of of an animal and determined, because a lot of those native people had just stories for like the existence and how the sun travels across the sky and all sorts of stuff, and everything had some sort of like a spiritual aspect to it and stuff like that. If it was an animal that they were viewing and seeing, and then they gave a spiritual sort of way to describe it, or if it was just, I guess the lake for them was living in a way. But when we talk about a specific cryptid, it really helps that believability of that cryptid existing if there was a native tribe in the area that also talked about that, though they use their own language and their own ways to describe it, whatever they called it. Like Bigfoot, say like the big brother or something like that, right? But they had parallel stories as what we'd see in modern times. Is that something that for you, when you were going into this, when you found out that there was, the native people at least referred to this lake in this manner, that might have kind of opened up a door where it was just like, oh, maybe there is something to this versus just like you were saying, some funny cartoon character on t-shirts and hats?
Definitely like that fact. And for them, they very much like it is the lake, but it can choose to take a physical form, and that's what people see when they see it.
Okay.
That's how they view it, right? Because yeah, there's a lot, like, indigenous people will say, like, the crow has a spirit side to it and everything like that, but they
Sure.
definitely feel, same with them with Bigfoot. They call it strunatum in their culture. It is a forest spirit and a guardian of the forest and the mountains, and it will choose to take a physical form to present itself to you when it wants to. And so that's why, what she says, when people try to take pictures of these things, it's always blurry because suddenly it's showing up and you're like, holy shit, like what's you know what I mean? It always takes you by surprise. And she's sort of like, if you see it, you're lucky. Don't waste time. Like, why do you got to take a picture of it? If you've seen it, it's special. That should be enough. If you've seen something that is like beyond our world, it should be enough, but it's never enough. We want to validate our experiences. But that kind of, for me, is like a paranormal investigator. It's like, we always poo-poo the personal experience because you can't show it to somebody. But honestly, if you've seen something that blows your mind, like Jeremy with Bigfoot, isn't that enough? Like, shouldn't that be enough? Like, who gives a fuck what anybody else thinks?
Well, that's why I fucking believe it.
That's right. Like, and I think that's it. I mean, you could say that for any religious, spiritual thing. It shouldn't matter what other people think.
Yeah.
If it
NDEs.
had an impact on you, it's meaningful. That's enough.
So, are you familiar with the classification systems of sea serpents and lake monsters?
I am aware of it. I couldn't like go and start rattling it off like off the top of my head, or how it works, or
I was trying to look it up and I can't seem to find it. I know it's in one of these books over here, but like there's like 4 of them, right? There's the Bernard Hewlett came up with his own, and then the 2 that I remember is the Champagne and the Coleman Hue. I want to say left field. I could be completely wrong. I could be pronouncing it completely wrong. The Mangia Copra classification system. For anybody that's interested in the classification of sea serpents and lake monsters, I highly recommend looking these up. And you'll kind of see more what Jason was talking about when it comes to either the physical or spiritual aspect of Ogopogo. And when you see things such as, like the common plesiosaur description of Loch Ness, right? There's these classification systems. I want to say that the most recent one that everyone uses now is the Coleman Hue. Could be wrong about that. I want to say Hewlett had the first one, and then Champagne, and then Coleman Hue is the one that we're using now. But basically, like we just did an episode on Pepe, the monster Lake Pepin, which is right down the road from us, and I want to say that it's also it's a serpentine type water monster, and like how you were saying, there's like this geographical area, latitude, longitudinal around the planet, especially in the northern hemisphere. There are, and it's funny because it does mirror in the southern hemisphere, especially when you get down to like Patagonia and Australia and Africa, right? But there's just not so much landmass down there, so it's not as prevalent, or it's not as known. But when you look at these longitudes, all that make a ring around the northern hemisphere of the planet, you get these different water monsters, and a lot of them are grouped into, well, there's the classifications, right? The big three are your, I want to say the water horse,
Mhm.
which is the one where it has the long snout. It'd be your Cadborosaurus,
Yeah.
right? Caddy would be a perfect example of a water horse. It has that long snout. Some people say Nessie also has that snout, and then there's the plesiosaur type water monster, which is what most people know Nessie to be. And then some people claim Peppy is also one of those. And then you have the serpent, the long serpentine one. And those are the big three. And of course,
Yeah.
there's other ones that are kind of awkward and weird, like elongated stingrays. And then they take those the water horse ones and they separate them into two separate categories, one with humpbacks and one with a flat back. So anybody listening that's interested in the classification systems and want to learn more about the water monsters around the world, I know Wavleman has one, Champagne and Coleman Hugh. Start there, and then there may be a new one. I don't know. It seems like they come out with a new one every 10 years. So,
Because things evolve all the time, right? The study
oh
into
yeah,
all these keeps changing. So you got to update your systems accordingly, I think.
yeah, and I think that's exactly what happens. But yeah, what else you got for me, boss man?
That's really it. I mean, I've started working on a Wendigo book
Ooh.
right now,
Ooh.
so that's kind of interesting. Spent time up in northern Alberta because that's where the story began with the Swift Runner story. So just started working on that, and we'll see what happens. But right now, like, it's really coming down to getting geared up for heading to Monster Fest and all that stuff with the Ogopogo, like with Cursed Waters and Legend of Ogopogo. So it's been kind of a whirlwind, exciting time.
Well, if you ever find yourself in Wendigo Lakes, Minnesota, let Jake and I know.
Absolutely.
We'll go take a trip, man, because we're
That'd be
right
fun.
next to Minnesota. I
That'd
know
be
Chad
fun.
Lewis does a lot of research up there, and I want to say he did a book on the Wendigo as well.
He did a very good book on the Wendigo.
Yeah, I think he did it
Yeah,
with
Chad
Kevin
knows a
Means
lot, and
also.
even he's done some YouTube stuff about it as well. Like he actually, I revisited some of the places that he visited when he came up here to work on his Wendigo book. So it's such a
Yeah,
seminal modern piece on the
yeah,
story. One can't help it.
The
fun
Wendigo
story.
Always good stuff.
story. The Wendigo
Fun.
story totally ruined a bunch of cool artwork that I used to like and movies and stuff. I actually saw a tattoo recently of some like deer monster that someone got. It was a really cool tattoo, and they were like, "Oh, it was from the shop." They're like, hashtag Wendigo." I was like, "Too bad it's just a pop culture thing and has nothing to do with Wendigo whatsoever."
Yeah,
I was like, "Cool tattoo though."
yeah. That's an interesting story. The Wendigo, like the folklore behind it,
Mhm,
and just how so it's bled not only into pop culture, like you
mhm.
say, Jake, but just how there's still modern stuff that you can associate with it that's happened within the last 20. I've even just learned the other day about a sighting allegedly near where I live, so I'm going to
Yeah.
look into that and try to add that to the book because I'd love them to go out and investigate. You know,
Oh yeah. Well, I can tell you one thing. Anybody listening, if you guys want to have an argument about a creature or spirit, find a Wendigo page or a cryptid page and start telling
Mm.
people that what they're seeing isn't actually the Wendigo, and that it's actually just more or less like a frozen zombie or a frozen zombie spirit, and people will
Yeah.
lose their fucking minds.
yes, they will.
But when you have Native Americans backing you up saying, "I don't know
Yeah.
where they're getting this deer head idea,"
Yeah,
it's like, yes, yes. They're like various tribes. They all have their
Yeah.
own ideas, but it has nothing to do with deer. You're like,
no,
But
yes.
you need to touch on that though. You need to touch
you
on
can't avoid it. It's
the
part of the
stag headed.
it's part of
It's
the
part
lore.
of the lore now.
Yeah,
Mm.
Fun fact about Chad Lewis. He actually graduated from the college right here in town from Wisconsin Stout, same town that Jake and I live in now.
sweet. I did not know that.
Yeah. So I reached out to him. Another person who hasn't answered my emails.
He's a yeah. I've just once chatted with him briefly through Messenger, but he's a hard guy to get a hold of, and I think just because he's so busy, he doesn't always get back,
Yeah.
as quick as he would like. So
He he's a stud. He's all over the place. I love him. All right. Bossman, where can they find all of your stuff? Oh, and your other podcast. You want to plug that real quick?
Yeah, that's just it's a show I do with Jolene, who I referenced. Like that's how I met Jolene, is researching Dying Light, and it's a mental health podcast. Like it has really nothing to do with. We touch on spiritual stuff sometimes for sure, but it's literally she's like a grief and trauma counselor, and I've had my experiences, so it's kind of like touching on mental health subjects from like the average Joe's perspective and then the counselor's perspective, and then bouncing ideas off each other. And that's called Integrateness, and you can listen to that at integrateness.com. Check it out. The books, my Beyond the Fray books, are available through Beyond the Fray Publishing and on Amazon. And Cursed Waters will be out. Well, debuts at Monster Fest via Small Town Monsters, and the book Legend of Ogopogo comes out through Small Town Monsters Publishing. You want to keep up with me? I'm on Facebook and Instagram.
You're gonna be at Monster Fest this year?
I am, yeah. I'm going to be a guest there. I'm guess I'll be talking the book, and maybe it'll be part of the Q&A for Cursed Waters. I'll find out. I don't know much yet. I just know I'm going. I'm gonna be there. I don't know how that itinerary is going to roll out yet, but I'll be there.
We're gonna have to keep our ears to the ground. Maybe Jake and I will take a trip out to Monster Fest 3 next year.
That'd be cool. I didn't get to go last year, so I was really bummed out about that. But I'm really excited to be. It was once everything came together, it's like there's no way I can't be there.
Yeah, it was a huge success too, man. That was a big thing last year.
I'm really excited about it. So feels like I could retire now. Happily.
Jake, you got anything else, bud?
No, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. Sorry that Jeremy didn't let me know we were talking about a specific book that you wrote.
Well, I did say we were talking about NDEs and Ogopogo. Okay, I guess I didn't mention the book. I apologize.
Yeah.
Yeah, what an asshole.
That whole Nemesis thing, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. He's going to be the reason why I go to coast to coast and leave Info Rabbit Hole.
It all happened right here, folks. Jake's ascension to coast radio.
I would follow you.
No,
I'd
I'll
also
tell him that you suck. That you withhold information. Don't trust him.
All right, moving on. All right, well, that's been another episode of the Infinite Rabbit Hole podcast. Jason, one more time, thank you very much for coming on again. It's always a pleasure, my friend. Really.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, guys. I always enjoyed it as well. It was so good to catch up because it had been a while.
Yeah, man.
Yes, sir.
Make sure it's not so long a wait next time.
Absolutely.
All right, well, until next time, travelers, I'll see you in the next fork in the path of the Infinite Rabbit Hole. Bye. No. Nobody else is going to say goodbye. Say goodbye.
Bye.
There we go.
We had to.